Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Aida Salazar, who is a children's book author. And Aida, for readers unfamiliar with your work, how would you describe what you write?
Well, thank you. It's so good to be with you, Selena. And all right, I would describe what I write as books that focus on identity and social justice for children ages 0 to right now till about 14, 15.
Ah, okay. So it's a larger audience than just picture books.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
because I started my career with a novel in verse called The Moon Within, and which is a banned book, unfortunately, in several states. And then I didn't publish a picture book until my third book, In the Spirit of a Dream. So I've kind of mixed it up since then.
How did you feel about having your book banned?
Well, it's heartbreaking. At first
Yeah.
people would tell me, well, if I remember when we were about to publish The Moon Within, I spoke to my editor, Nick Thomas, and he said, well, I said, well, you know what I'm worried about? I'm worried that the book might get banned. And he's like, well, if you get banned, I'll be the first to send you a bottle of champagne. It's great, great for sales. But that was like 6 years ago, and it sure enough had been silently censored. But when this most recent ban of movement of banned books kind of started coming to the fore, it became very clear that these bans are very effective. And this is the book that I don't get invited to speak about
Mm.
anywhere pretty much unless it's a university, because it's a groundbreaking book. And I don't say that to like toot my own horn, but because it's the first book in 50 years since Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, to speak about menstruation in fiction. And 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 it's the first time coming from a Latina or a woman of color. So it was groundbreaking in many ways because it spoke about body positivity and gender fluidity. But because of those things, because menstruation is so taboo in our puritanical society, and of course gender fluidity is challenged so much that it has received so much, you know unfortunately, backlash. And so I felt just devastated by that, devastated by the fact that when a book is banned, it is successful. It was removed from the shelves, or it's silently censored by gatekeepers, by parents, by librarians, and other community folks. Um, you are denying access to a reader who might find themselves in the book, might find their experience reflected, but also will find compassion and understanding through the book. And in The Moon Within, in particular, there is the best friend is gender fluid, and the community comes together and accepts and lovingly celebrates their where they are in their journey of self-discovery. And I offered that as a way to show readers that gender expansiveness is not something to fear or to look down upon, but something that a community can nurture and support without having any hate or or negativity attached to it. So it's sad, because
Mhm.
the book was offered with so much love, and then it's gotten this negativity attached to it.
And what is the name of that book again?
That's called The Moon Within. It's about a
The
little
Moon
girl whose
Within.
first period is coming, and her mom wants to give her a moon ceremony, and she doesn't want it. And at the same time, her best friend is is uncovering their true identity and understanding that they're gender fluid.
And the moon ceremony is the Spanish ceremony, or
It's pre-Columbian, actually. It's a native Mexican indigenous tradition, and it happens in the Americas overall. but it's a coming of age ceremony that happens by the light of the moon when a young person receives their first menstruation. And so it's a celebration, it's an understanding, and the elders pass down wisdom, and it kind of pushes back against that narrative that, oh, periods are shameful and dirty and gross and painful and all of the things. And it's more of a kind of embracing of the power and beauty that's within this incredible, like one of arguably during that time in humanity, it's one of the most transformational moments, because you leave being a child and you enter this adolescence, and sometimes you're ready and sometimes you're not. And but we don't have ceremonies, we don't have systems that help children transition in a beautiful and positive, self-loving way, um, like we used to. And
Hmm.
so the idea is to reclaim that and take that back and use it.
Wow, what a shame.
Yeah.
It's it's such a it's so horrible.
I know, it's
Um,
really interesting because all of us come from a menstruator. Every person on the planet, without menstruation, there would be no humanity. And so it boggles my mind, but it is also a testament to how powerful and damaging patriarchy has been for us as humans, that we have to deny that very fundamental part of the life
mhm.
cycle.
I wonder if you didn't have the gender fluid person in it, if it would have been banned.
Well, yeah, I think it would have, because people aren't necessarily ready. There are other books, there are other books about menstruation which which also have been, banned. Well, like for instance, I went to this bilingual educators conference, and I did this round robin, right? Where I pitched my book to a crop of people who approached the table. And I did this 5 different times to 5 different people. And the first one said, you know what, this sounds like a lovely story, but we would not be able to teach this in our classroom. We'd have to send out a note home, and we'd, have to separate girls and boys. It was very traditional in that sense. And it's just they just said, "You know what? Honestly, teachers are too tired and too overworked to champion a controversial book."
Wow.
So so it's all the things, I think, all the things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it seems like that's really the kinds of things that you write about, the just the social um the social things.
Yeah.
And yeah. Um, okay, so getting back to your later books, okay.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your latest book?
Well, I can tell you, for this year,
Hmm.
I just released a board book called When Moon Blooms, because of course I'm in love with the moon. I have a previous last year I released an anthology with my co-anthologist Jamila Said Mendez, and 16 different middle grade authors, called Calling the Moon. And that book was a response to the lack of representation by people of color, in particular, Black and Indigenous people of color in the middle grade space,
Hmm.
to tell our stories about menstruation. So that came out that time. So I just feel like there's so much to say about the moon. And then so last week, When Moon Blooms just released, and that is about a little girl who sees the moon for the first time, and her mom tells her how the different phases of the moon will affect her body and what to do. Like when when the moon is new, it's time to wish and dream. When the moon is growing, it's time to work hard. When the moon is full, when it blooms, it's time to dance and celebrate and harvest what you've worked for. And then when it's waning, it's time to it's time to begin again. So it's this just very simple, uh understanding of being in connection with a celestial body that's so the closest celestial body that we have, and how it affects us, because the moon affects everything, natural beings and the tides, and
Hmm.
so yeah.
Absolutely.
And so that's one. And then I've got another book coming out in 3 weeks. Oh my God, I
Oh,
can't believe it.
wow.
3 weeks. It's called Ultraviolet. And so far it's received 2-starred reviews from Kirkus and School Library Journal. Kirkus said it's a story that sings to the soul, and it's a story about a little boy who turns well, his vision turns, he sees everything in ultraviolet light when he falls in love for the first time. He's a eighth grader, 13-year-old, and it's about his first, everything's his first, like, feelings in puberty. And so I get pretty graphic, not graphic, but like intimate. And he experiences his first heartbreak, and he has to understand what it is to be an ally, what it is to learn how to lose, because many people, especially boys, don't know how to deal with loss, because culturally we don't allow them to explore that very vulnerable side of themselves, and so it turns to violence and anger. And we see this repeated over and over with the
Mm.
wars that we're seeing around the world, with the outrageous number of domestic violence cases, even school shooters, right? These are all people, mostly men, who don't know how to be able to express their emotions, so it turns violent. And so the idea around this book is as much as it is about light and exploration of love, and and it's funny. I have to say, believe it or not, this is like the funniest book I've ever written. I laughed so much writing this book because puberty is really hilarious to me. and and so I laughed a lot writing this book, and but it's also about these deeper issues of masculinity and toxic masculinity, and how to heal and be a strong new kind of boy in and young man in the world. So that book is called Ultraviolet, and it comes out April 2nd.
Wow. Okay. And you said you had a third, did you?
um I will, yes. Okay, so When Moon Blooms is a book that is part one of three, a
Oh,
series of three, and the series is called My Living World, and so it's how you relate to the world. And the first one is When Moon Blooms, and in the fall, When Water Flows will come out, and then in the following spring, we'll have When Sun Rises. Um,
oh,
released, and that'll be the little set of
oh,
books
wonderful.
by
W-
illustrated by Caribai M. Benavides.
Excellent. Okay. So if you can choose one of your books that you'd like to talk about, possibly Ultraviolet or your, excuse me, or the Moon book,
Mhm.
what was the inspiration for it?
Mm, okay. Well, I think the ultraviolet came from my young son's experience. I mean, it came from a lot of places, but my young son, after I'd written The Moon Within, he was 11 when it published, and he and his best friend read it, boys, and they were like, his best friend told me, Aida, Miss Aida, I don't think that I should have read that. It feels like TMI because it's a very intimate portrait of a young girl's life. And he's like, and anyway, when are you gonna write The Sun Within? And so for him, and he's like, and my son's like, yeah, mom, when are you gonna write a book for me? And because the other book was loosely inspired by my daughter, though it was totally fictionalized. And then when my son actually fell in love and got heartbroken for the first time, I thought it was just such an important time, such an important life lesson to experience. And so yeah, so it came to be. I was inspired by him and his young friend Mario, and then I started eavesdropping, like when him and his friends were around, or I was driving them home or whatever, and they're like out in their world, and I just thought it was really hilarious. And then my son was really candid with me about about what was happening with his body. And I just thought, and we would laugh about it, you know, like things were funny. And so it came from that place. But in terms of craft, it was the first time I'd written a boy from a purely boy's perspective. And so it
Hmm.
was a big challenge for me to write from that voice and make sure that I had a very authentic, strong, funny voice. And that's where all the eavesdropping kind of came in. That's where
I
that,
would imagine. So
yeah.
how much research did you have to do?
Well, I did a lot of research on the color ultraviolet, right? And what happens,
Hmm.
and then I also did research on bees because this young boy is scared of bees, he's scared of girls and puberty. These are his like big fears. And so I did, you know, a lot of research around masculinity as well, and like
Hmm.
um how we as a society move, but then also, I mean, understand masculinity, but then also my husband and my son, because my daughter and I did these like the moon ceremonies and these mother-daughter rites of passages, they started to do similar with people in their community, in our community. So all fathers and sons, and they did they called it sun ceremonies. And so
Hmm.
they did and I asked them, I would interview them about what happened and what it was like, and because I wanted to be there, but they're like moms were not allowed, and so that would also played a big part of it. But I would say that Bell Hooks is all about love, and oh, I'm forgetting the other book. It was one of the most important books, but that book was really important because it talked about masculinity and how black and brown boys in particular are cheated, are they're victims of patriarchy. They are also not, because they're not allowed to feel certain emotion or express social certain emotions. We are creating these little time bombs, and and with suppressed anger and you know, frustration or loss, grief, all of the different kinds of emotions, and there's no avenue for them to express it safely in the world. I think, you know, Gen Z is changing that because they're much more sensitive, much more connected with one another, a little less than they were, you know, when Bell Hooks was writing this book. But I do think that it's still pretty prevalent, especially in the Mexican and Latina communities, that, you know, you see the machismo still pretty much there and in the world, but I think the young people are changing it. So that was a big part of my research.
Hmm. And you write you tend to write with the Latinx communities as well.
Yes,
So,
that's pretty much from where I write. I write from those communities, mostly Mexican indigenous, and, you know, first and second generation people living in the United States. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Mexico. I was brought over when I was 9 months old. And so I have a little bit of both worlds, this, you know, this rootedness in my culture, and then also, you know, a a solid understanding of what it is to be bicultural in the
mhm.
United States.
So the characters that you, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so that the characters that you create are also from that culture.
Yes, yes. I mean, like for instance, like we just published last year. The another book that I published last year was Jovita Wore Pants: The Story of a Mexican Freedom Fighter, which won a Caldecott honor this
Yes.
year, and illustrated by Molly Mendoza. That book is about a Mexican heroine. She also lived in the United States on and off, but she was the story takes place in Mexico. So that's also part of speaking this diasporic, you know, American story in not America and the United States sense of the world, but in the Pan American sense of the word. And and so yeah, so she was a freedom fighter in Mexico, who wore pants.
Yeah, and she was also a member of your family, I gather.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I just got back from Mexico last week, where we celebrated her 113th anniversary of her birth. So it was
Oh,
beautiful. There was this like they exhibited the entire book in these on these big vinyl banners in the plaza in the center of her hometown, and it was just like a beautiful time. There was mariachi, a youth mariachi played, a youth folklorico dancing. And you know, they gave me a plaque for my work. It was just like so gorgeous. It was a
oh,
beautiful experience.
that must have been absolutely amazing.
It was, but I think it just it like the more that I think about it, it's just that it, you know, these stories that I write about have not been written about. And so they have meaning to certain communities deeper than other communities. You know, clearly Jovita's story for having, you know, won the Caldecott honor, it like touches many people and it inspires many people. But you know, because she was gender nonconforming, because you know she was a woman and doing something very brave during a time that was very difficult for any person. But then also she has this deeper meaning to people in Mexico.
Wow. So when you write these stories, are you a pantser or a outliner?
Hmm. Well, you know, I used to be a pantser. And then I took a course on plotting by somebody who was just like had spreadsheets and they had a whole system, and that didn't seem to work for me. But then I just kind of dove into um outlining, just like and writing the story in synopsis. So I'm a little bit of both. I write the synopsis pantsing it, but then I fix it in terms of story structure only in the outline. So I'll write a summary of the story in like, you know, it could be anywhere between 3 and 12 pages
Hmm.
summary. And and then I write from that, like backbone. I just put the meat on the I put the meat on the bones. And to me it's all a creative process, right? Like you're taking ideas, something out of thin air, the creativity coming from the ancestors, I believe, right? They come from the
Hmm.
ancestors, and you are making it real. You're putting it down. And so that's a very magical experience, no matter if you are, you know, outlining first and then pantsing, you're still creating. It's still both of them are a creative process that's magical. So so it's a little bit of both.
Right. I think that's what most authors do, a little bit of
Mhm.
both. Yeah. So when you create your characters, do they kind of let you tell you the story? I mean, do they kind of get in your head and they say, "Oh, this is going to happen next"?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of that. So like when I wrote Land of the Cranes, which was my
Hmm.
second novel in verse, I was one of the strategies that I do when I study is I take, you know, a stack of picture books or a stack of books and I dissect them, kind of like a doctor. I will dissect them for their textual strategy to see what is the author doing with voice, with perspective, with story, with language. And so I will do that. And I was doing that practice. I do that quite often. I was doing that practice when I just wrote the word deportation, and w- all of a sudden I was writing the story of a little girl whose father gets deported, and she believes she's got wings because her father has told her that she's a crane who has come back from to their promised land to live among the cranes, right? And so because it's an Aztec myth, and so she's you know, the first 30 pages of Land of the Cranes came out kind of like completely intact, just as almost pretty much almost as I wrote them in the first draft. And she was there, this little person out of out of nowhere was sitting in the room with me and telling me that she liked chocolate milk and that her best friend was Amparo and they played on the swings and that her mom, like all of the details. And so I used to believe that that was impossible because I went to see Isabel, the great Isabel Allende, speak once, and she said that she was writing and that the spirit of this, her main character, came into the room and that she just stayed with her for the entirety of the novel. And I was like, yeah, right, lady, come on, like, stop, But I was a young writer at the time. And so when that really happened to me, I went like, oh, there's really something to this. There's something
Mhm.
like I'll go back to that word magical, but otherworldly, something like like an opening a portal. And so yes, and that happens. And often it happens when I'm doing something meditative like crocheting or washing dishes, sometimes in the shower, and sometimes when I'm coming out of sleep. So
Mhm.
that's when I feel like, oh, the ancestors are telling me something, and I shoot up and I like will go down and write what I have to say. So
I've got that written down now.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Now, what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out Ultraviolet?
um, well, it was the challenge was that it was a boy
Mm.
perspective. It's not an experience I've ever had. It's one that I was witnessing in my son, and thanks to his honesty, I got to see firsthand. Um, and so that was the biggest challenge. Yeah, but I had so much fun. A lot of it came out very seamlessly, and I also had to make sure my editor was kind of like on me to make sure that I had the arc of the father. The father in the story is really a complicated man because he's modern and he's he's a city planner, but he's still kind of caught up in his Mexican way. He takes his son to cockfights. He tells him to be to man up the Solis way. Their last name is Solis, and so he doesn't want his son to cry. And but at the same time, he runs the kitchen at their home, and he's the one that cooks, and he cleans. He's a very complicated new wave macho, as he calls himself. So making sure that his arc and his growth in the novel was satisfying was another one of my challenges that my editor kind of kept saying, yeah, you're not there yet with this. So that was my biggest challenge. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, so was there one character that you, excuse me, that you loved or hated the most in Ultraviolet?
Mm, no, I think that like even the antagonist in the story, his name is Chava, the boy who steals his girlfriend. Um and I say steals in quotes because as you will see in the story, they realize like you can't own anybody, can't be like nobody owns any other person, right? And so he steals the girlfriend, and he's kind of a little stinker, and but he's also a boy going through a divorce. His parents are getting divorced, and he's kind of acting out and also replicating these patterns of masculinity that they think are the right ones, right? Like, calling out the main character Elio to fight, and that sort of thing. And so it just feels like I couldn't hate him because I knew what that he was a victim to, that all the men in that story were victims, and that their choices were not totally conscious, but they're coming from a wound. There is this this Jesuit priest, and I'm not religious, but I think he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. But he worked with incarcerated or formerly incarcerated gang members in LA. He still does. His name is Father Greg Boyle, and he's got an incredible program. And he talks about these like heinous things that some of these gang members had done, and he tells their backstory. And you understand that these both men were victims of equally heinous, if not more heinous, um, crime and violence as young boys. And he talks about something called the wound underneath, and he talks about something called radical forgiveness, and and so that's something that I'm constantly trying to get to understand myself. I mean, because that's a lot, how do you forgive somebody who's committed a heinous crime? I think about what's happening in the Middle East, and for uh, back between Israel and Palestine, and especially Palestine right now. You think, well, how do you forgive that kind of devastation? And I'm not there yet. But I forgave my characters, and to just bring it back, that I couldn't hate them. I had to really understand the pain that they had underneath, the wound underneath.
Yeah. I what do you think that a lot of non-Hispanic readers would do you think they would really be able to relate
Hmm.
because of the Hispanic characters and the situations?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. The
I
book
think
is
so too.
Uh, because
But
of all of my books, I think this one might be the one that is most relatable, because the young people speak in a very contemporary fashion. They say words like no cap, hella, like it's very, very, very contemporary in that sense, in terms of language. But as I've gone to school visits and I've told people, young people about the book, when I say, well, it's a story about a young boy who falls in love, sees everything in ultraviolet colors, and has his first heartbreak, and everybody's like, oh, there's always one kid in the audience is like swooning and like can't believe it. And they've been of many races and ethnicities, and because heartbreak is a universal feeling, but so is patriarchy. Right? Like we all have been victims of patriarchy, of course, the girls and gender expansive folks and queer folks, but then also the boys. And so I think so, and because it's funny, I think kids are going to be able to um to really relate.
mhm. Yeah, I thought so too. Okay, now I have questions about being a writer.
Sure.
What's your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Um, what are my feelings? Well, I mean, I find it a huge privilege to be able to do this work. Uh, I know that, 20 years ago, Latina writers, Mexican American writers were few and far between. We had Sandra Cisneros, Elena Maria Viramontes, and a few others. Um, Luz Villanueva, all like few. I mean, Ana Castillo, like maybe 10, and hardly any that were specifically focused on children. Though Sandra Cisneros' work was also used in schools, um, um, for children. But really, it's a privilege to say, like, oh, I am standing on the shoulders of these really incredible people. And as a Latina in the United States, we don't have a very big um literary legacy, right? Like, we have them, but that's contemporary. We didn't have universities, we didn't have the Langston Hugheses and the Harlem Renaissance, and we just didn't have that kind of literary legacy. And so to be a Latina writer in this in this moment, standing on the shoulder of giants, because those women of color and people of color who have come before me are really, they opened so many doors for us. But to be here now and to have such willing publishers, I mean, I'm at the point where publishers are coming to me to with ideas like, hey, what about, would you be interested in?
Oh, that's
And
great.
I know it's fantastic. It's such a privileged position to be in. But yeah, I mean, I'm 51 years old, and so I have a lifetime of um, of stories that I've yet to tell, and I'm just grateful to be in this position. So
That's
as long as they'll publish me, I'm gonna keep writing. I mean, I'm gonna be keep writing regardless, but as long as they can publish me, I'm feeling very grateful for all of
great. So, what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process,
it.
and how do you overcome it?
Well, rejection is really difficult because even I have lots of manuscripts, lots of stories, lots of ideas that I think are brilliant, and I like, have fleshed them out, and I haven't written them all because I what I tend to do is I write the story from beginning to end in synopsis form, and then I will submit to my editor, or editors, depending on who, because I'm now published by 4 different publishing houses. So I'll submit to the different folks, and sometimes they say, no, that's not okay. Like, I haven't written a YA because a certain publishing house was like, you know what, we don't want to pigeonhole you, but we don't want to publish your young adult. We think that you're great in the middle grade space. And I
Mm.
was like, and that felt very limiting to me as a writer.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
then I like to innovate in my craft. So it's part of the reason why I write novels in verse, because they're a hybrid form. So um I'm constantly learning. Writing different voices is a big deal. My next book is going to be a multiple point of view book, which I'm very excited to write. Um, and it's new and challenging. So I like the challenge. I like seeing something that's difficult, but the hardest part about it is that when I think I'm like creating something, I'm an artist, like Erica Badu said, I'm an artist, and I'm sensitive about my stuff. So I like, it's when you get rejected, it's just like a little bit deflating. But you have to dust yourself off. You have to have really thick skin to be in this business, and also feel pretty confident that that the muse is always going to be there, the ancestors are going to be there, and if the story needs to be told, it will be told, if not from this publisher, from the next one.
Okay. So what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, this year I'm going to be writing this multiple POV book, so
Right.
that's where I'll be, and I've already written all of the books for the My Living World series, the board books.
Yep.
Um, but I do have an anthology that was announced, and we're just a little bit delayed in having it published, with Dial Books, Penguin. It's called Sing Me a Story. It's an anthology that I edited by myself for the first time, an anthology of Latinx stories, in short stories in verse. And when I first pitched it, there was nothing like it, but I think now there's another one has come out. But at the time, it was the first of its kind in any age group, or be like period. We hadn't ever seen a collection of short stories in verse. But now this is going to be the first one by the Latina community, so I'm very, very excited. We have a beautiful cover that was illustrated by Gabby Alessandrini, and I'm sorry, Alessandro, and I'm just really excited for that to come out.
Is that a middle grade?
It's a middle grade, and it was some of the people are like Guadalupe Garcia McCall, David Bowles, Nonieka Ramos. Let's see who else. Raquel Vasquez Gilliland, Ari Tyson, some just really extraordinary award-winning authors who are poets as well.
Fantastic.
Hmm.
Okay. So, what has been the greatest adventure or your greatest adventure in your writing career?
Well, you know what? I just experienced it. I just experienced it last week in Mexico because I was, like I said, I was born in Mexico, and just going back and feeling just returning as a daughter of Jalpa. The name of my pueblo is called Jalpa. Just returning as a daughter of Jalpa, and feeling the pride that they had in me for
Mhm.
doing something that my soul, I mean, this is my soul's work as much as it is my livelihood, but I, when I write, this is my soul's work. And so for them to appreciate me in such a spectacular way was the greatest
Mhm.
adventure, the greatest appreciation. And I'm getting emotional about it. My face is turning red, but it was really the most amazing experience I've ever had in my career. And and I just wish that my mom was around to have witnessed it, because she was my source. You know, both my parents are from Jalpa, the town, and I went back with my father, but I really missed my mom. But other than that, it was just spectacular.
Okay. So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned in your writing career?
Mm. The greatest lesson is to be tenacious. I tell this to young people all the time, to kids. I teach them that word if they don't know what it means. I tell them, it just means to not give up, because
Mm.
being tenacious in this industry or in anything that you want to accomplish is so important, because it builds your resilience.
Mhm.
It builds your humility, because you have to fail. Things don't come easily. You have to fail before you can succeed. And so if you have a tenacity about you, then you're able to be resilient and to not give up and to keep going and going and going until you get to where you go, or where you need to go. So that's been the biggest lesson, I would say, and one that I wouldn't share with anybody, any
Okay. And
aspiring writers or readers or.
okay. And do you have any other pieces of advice aside from that?
Yeah, I would say just be humble. That as creatives, one of the things that, and in this world that's very focused on celebrity and the yeah, the celebrity culture, or just making somebody an influencer or whatever. I think that is such a misguided use of energy and life. You know what I mean? Like it's just so, it just feels like so disingenuous and not valuable to me anyway. And so I try and be as humble as I can, and make sure that, like, we are part of the human race, right? We are part of a whole. And in indigenous ideology, that's essential, right? Community, understanding, and that we are not separate even from nature and from animals, and that we're part of this whole. And and so, there really is no room for celebrity. There is no room for these, you know special privileges for people, but that, when you approach it with humility and a sense of sharing, you're there is a goodness around that. And I think the universe will bend in your favor to make the things that you want to make possible, when you're in service and humble to others.
That's wonderful. I think, in other words, you really shouldn't go into this field just to be famous either.
No, no. I mean, that's not the point. Yeah, I mean, when you write for
Exactly.
children, you're writing to be in service to children, to share these ideas and these stories and these lessons. Really, the reason why I write about social justice is because I want us to be able to point to wounds that exist in our society, and for kids to feel like they can see it, even if it's from another culture, but that they can see it, empathize with it, and know that they can help make the world a better place. That's why we're here, right? Like that's what we want for our future. It's existential at this point, right? Like we are going to kill ourselves because we're not, taking care of the planet, because we're not taking care of one another, and we're poisoning our food system and our water system and our air. So if we can't care for one another and really kind of focus away from celebrity and these special privileges of certain groups over others, then we're doomed. So my hope is still there. My hope is that we will, and that's why I do the work that I do.
That's wonderful. Okay. Are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you'd recommend to other writers that may have helped you in your career?
Well, I have to say that Las Musas, I'm one of the founding members of, there were 20 of us, founding members of Las Musas. It's a debut and sophomore author collective of Latina authors. And they were instrumental in the launching of my career. It was difficult because, these ideas of collectivity, I come from, an organizing background. So
Mhm.
um, ideas of being in the collective, of not kind of being like the, oh, look at me, kind of person. That, we had a lot of rough understandings at the very beginning. But I think that once it launched and we all settled on like, yes, we cannot be the only Latina at the table. We are stronger together. And this is a collective. There's no head in this, because that's patriarchal thinking, right? Like this is about the collective. And so that model now is so beautiful and so strong. So I would look, I would look at Las Musas, and we have this a resource page which has, like, it's an incredible resource with blogs and agents and bookstores and contests and craft and like all sorts of categories that we have for emerging writers that are helpful, especially people who are BIPOC. So yeah,
And
I
then
would say Las Musas.
so
Las,
what is it? Uh, can you spell it?
yeah, it's LasMusas, Las Musas, and it means the muses in Spanish, and it's and I think the website is lasmusasbooks.com. So you can check them out. They're fantastic. And even if you're not Latina, you can get a lot from their work, but then you can also see the new Latina writers that are coming on the set.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
only in the children's literature world. We don't do the adult world, but
Oh, wonderful.
mhm.
Okay, now I have questions about you as a person. What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
um I don't know. I don't know. I'm kind of an open book in many ways. But maybe folks don't know that I'm a gardener. I really like to garden. I've had a passion for gardening, and that secretly dream to live on a little ranchito, a little ranch somewhere, and grow food and raise chickens and goats, and yeah, and live off the land. That's kind of a dream of my husband's. Like, no, I'm a city boy, so we can't, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm not losing hope on my dream.
So what are your some of your hobbies
Mhm.
and passions when you're not writing, and how do you make time for them?
Well, I'm always multitasking. I'm a mother. I actually, maybe that's something people don't know. I'm a mother, but my kids are like so much taller than me. My son's almost 6 feet. I'm 5'1", and my daughter's 5'6". And so I'm the
Wow.
little mama. So maybe that's something people don't know. And my husband's 6'2". So um so when I'm not writing, I like to crochet and I like to garden. I love to dance. My husband's a great dancer and a musician, and so when we get a chance, we love to go see music, live music, and 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 I also love to cook. I adore cooking, and brings me a lot of peace. And I'm working on and I should say, while I'm doing most of these things, I'm listening to audiobooks. And so I'm like a big audiobook fan. And
Mm.
so I will, like, if I'm crocheting, I'm listening to an audiobook. If I'm gardening, I'm listening to an audiobook. If I'm cleaning or I'm cooking, audiobooks. So I don't
A
ever,
great
and I
idea.
don't, oh, this is something people don't know about me. I don't watch television. I don't know
Hmm.
anything about television. Like, I don't know what shows I don't are on, or like I don't know the new actors. I just don't watch television.
Oh,
I'll like
wow.
stream a documentary or something like with my husband every now and then, but I listen to books or read.
Hmm. That's a very good idea nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's great. So, um, what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have around you when you're writing or editing?
Oh my gosh, I wish that I could show you. Like today, I happen to be home, and so you could probably see there's like a shadow of a bed back there. I'm in my bedroom doing this interview. But my writing space, I just got an office outside the home, and the and it's a beautiful historic building with hardwood floors and high ceilings, and it's got a couch in there now, and plants and books, and it's, I haven't put my art up yet because I just moved it in. So my writing space has been is very quiet. I mean, quiet except for that I hear people coming in and out of the neighboring offices, but it's my own little sanctuary. And I don't have to have anything nearby. I mean, I because I'm a mother, and I really have, like, when I started my publishing career, I was like writing in the spaces, right? Like I was writing at the soccer field, or and waiting in the car, well, for my daughter to come out of dance class, or so whenever I could, when I put the kids down to bed or whatever. So I was always writing in the spaces, and literally, like, I wrote my first book right there on in this little corner that I'm pointing to, because it's a little corner where I sleep. But that's where I wrote it. So I don't require nothing, and now having an office outside of my home is a big luxury. But I'm kind of getting used to it, because I like to multitask, like throw in a load of laundry and and then and write. But because again, I'm not like um really high maintenance. But when I'm on deadline and have to revise or whatever, I need to shut out the world. So having that office
Mhm.
is going to be fantastic. Yeah.
So, do you have to have coffee or food or anything else?
Oh yeah, I don't do coffee because I'm not into coffee, but I have to do matcha. Matcha green tea. I'm a matcha
Ah,
green tea drinker, and I swear I've written like 2 books on just fueled by matcha. And stretching and yoga. I had to like I had to do a lot of yoga.
and since you now have an office, I gather you probably don't have a furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companion with you.
No, I'm so bummed about that. I've been wanting a furry friend. I had a cat for 21 years, and when he
Oh,
passed, I haven't had the heart to get a new pet, because it's just like a little bit of trauma around that, because you love them so much. They become part of your family, and when you lose them, it's just a loss that I wasn't I wasn't willing to take on again. But but during the pandemic, I was asking my husband, like, let's get an animal. We're just here, like, but we couldn't find one. And
yes.
So we never got around to it, but then, things opened up again, and I've just been on the road so much, at least, 2 or 3 times a month, that I have not been able um, to like feel like I'm going to be here, and this animal can depend on me, because I don't want the animal to depend on other people, but I'm yearning for a pet. I've been
Yeah,
yearning, yeah, because they're
I,
so pure.
they
They're
are,
so pure.
and they
And
help. I think even though they hinder you, they help you.
yeah, yeah, their love is pure. It's so like it's of the most unconditional. I mean, yes, they want food, but their love
Oh yeah,
and their
all the time.
expressions, yeah, their expressions of love are so pure.
Yeah, my cat, one of my cats is a pandemic cat, and it was so
Oh,
hard to get him. So hard.
yeah,
It was unbelievable.
yeah.
Um, so when you're writing, do you prefer silence or music? And if music, what kind of music?
Um, well, mostly I prefer silence. I have some noise canceling headphones, but if like for instance, if I'm in my office and there's just lots of noise or whatever, I will YouTube has this like um these it's like a certain kind of megahertz, like this music that helps heal you, like, and so I put that on. It's got no words, it's just instrumental, and it's really beautiful. So that's the only thing I can probably tolerate in jazz. It's like music that has no words, because when it
Hmm.
has words, I'm like pulled out, because because language is my art form, so it has to be something quiet. I often will go to see music, and I always take a little notepad, because I get inspired while I'm listening to or watching music, and I'm not even looking. My husband gets so annoyed. He's like, "They're up there." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm down here," because I'm listening, but I'm just watching.
Oh, okay. So I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
Where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And I have to give a plug for Annie's.
Yes.
You can you can get Aida's books at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. So where else can people find your books?
Well, I am such a supporter of independent bookstores like Annie's.
Thank you.
So if you can request my books at independent bookstores, I'd be so grateful. Um, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Amazon for so many reasons, but so yeah, I wouldn't encourage people to go there, but bookstores. Go to these. Go to Mrs. Dalloway's, which is my local bookstore, and they typically I can have stuff signed. If you all want to order from Annie's Ultraviolet, pre-order it. I will send Annie signed book plates and stickers for pre-order if you're interested.
Oh,
So,
wonderful. Great. Thank you. That would be great.
all right, yeah.
And
So
my
you can get
last
a signed
question.
copy at Annie's.
Great. Thank you. And my last question is, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Oh, thank you. I'm mostly I kind of left Twitter. I had a nice following on Twitter, but I left Twitter. Um, I mean, I'm still on there technically, but I don't post anymore. It's at Aida, AIDA underscore writes, WRITES, at Instagram mostly. I'm on Instagram. I have a TikTok. I'm not as good about it. Um, and then on Facebook, you can find me at Aida Writes with no underscore in between. But every
A
other platform, I'm there. I'm not on Threads. Yeah. So
web
I'm
page?
webpage. Oh, aidasalazar.com.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was wonderful to talk to you. And good
Yes.
luck with your with your new books. They
Thank you so much.
sound really great, and I'm really bummed out about your books being banned, your book being banned.
Yeah, yeah. Me too, me too. But hopefully there's authors against book bans that have come together. There are different organizations, um, like Penn is doing is stuff. We need diverse books.
Oh
But
yes, yes.
yeah. So there are lots of people doing really wonderful work in
And I
terms of.
think people get the books even though they're banned. I think they find ways. So
Yeah, but they have to know about them.
yeah,
That's the problem for
yeah,
so many of us. So yeah,
yeah.
support,
So
support, support.
yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ada, and hopefully we'll be seeing you again.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much,
Thank
Celine.
you.
It was a pleasure.